Annandale, Virginia, December 18th, 1996. A woman's body discovered in a cemetery. Mystery surrounds almost every aspect of her death, and that baffles investigators.
There was a plastic bag over her head with masking tape around the bottom to keep it closed by her neck area, so it appeared that she had asphyxiated.
Found close to her body, a typewritten message.
And the note said that she had taken her own life and didn't want to be identified.
She said, I am doing this by my own hand, signed Jane Doe.
Who would sign a note that way? Jane Doe is the term used for an unidentified dead female. But who is this woman that seemingly ended her life in a lonely graveyard?
So this case has baffled us for decades. We don't find these circumstances often.
This is the story of a very complex mystery. The mystery of a woman who seemingly ended her life in a lonely graveyard, and the forensic science used to finally discover who she was. I'm Nancy Grace. This is Bloodline Detectives. Annandale, Virginia, 1996. Annandale's a very prosperous commuter town, half an hour's drive from Washington, D.C. But 1 week before Christmas, a worker at Pleasant Valley Memorial Park makes a bizarre discovery.
He gets to work with his partner, and they are driving around on the grounds to do their normal checks. And when they come near the mausoleum area, they see something that gets their attention, and they realize it is a person. They initially think that someone may be sleeping there, so they approach the person and try to nudge the body and don't get a response. And at that point, they realize that something is wrong, and they notify the police.
Frantically called 911, and our officers responded to the scene to really explain what happened and why it happened.
In this case, when they found somebody that had been deceased, they notified their supervisors, who then started crime scene detectives as well as homicide detectives to come and investigate further. She was near the mausoleum that was in proximity to where they had children and babies buried, and her body was still warm and it was still in good condition when they arrived.
The detectives also saw that there was a plastic bag over her head with masking tape around the bottom to keep it closed by her neck area, and so it appeared that she had asphyxiated.
She had a Eddie Bauer coat on. Everything was very tidy and orderly. She had some jewelry on, a ring that was notable and a little bit different. She had a cassette player that had several cassette tapes.
It was comedy tapes, Jeff Foxworthy, Monty Python, tapes of comedians. So it appeared that she put on one of the cassettes, put the headphones on, and presumably consumed the alcohol, taken whatever medication was there, placed the bag around her head, sealed it with the masking tape, and essentially fell asleep while listening to the cassette. And then as they dug further into her clothing in an attempt to find possible identification, they found in her pockets she had 2 envelopes typed. One was addressed to the cemetery itself and one to the coroner, the medical examiner.
And the note said that she had taken her own life and didn't want to be identified.
She said, I am doing this by my own hand, signed Jane Doe.
That That note explained that she desired to be cremated. She asked that there be no autopsy, and she actually left money, $50 bills, to help pay for the cremation and her burial. I think she purposely typed that note so her handwriting couldn't be identified by a family member, and she left no clue to who she was and why she was there.
And she had chosen the children's and infants section of the cemetery for reasons that no one could figure out. The detectives, trying to determine who she was, ran down the identities of the people that she was found near, the grave sites that she was found near, and could not find a connection to those grave sites, to those people buried there.
A chilling discovery in a graveyard leads to a legal conundrum. The female victim leaves a handwritten note insisting that she be cremated and that she remain anonymous forever. But the law says a suicide victim may never be cremated without first an autopsy.
So we did do an autopsy. We read her note, hundreds of times, if not thousands of times, but we needed to do a complete and thorough investigation. And we did determine that she did die from asphyxiation, but she did have alcohol in her system and a narcotic that we believe she took intentionally.
She was older, appeared to be early 60s, red hair, possibly dyed. And so her fingerprints were taken, dental x-rays were taken, x-rays of her body to see if there was any indication of broken bones, that you could go back then and look at medical records to see if something matches up. But back then, mostly fingerprints and dental records.
They examined her body afterwards and found that she did have a big scar across her stomach, and the detectives theorized that she had had a cesarean section at some point, that she had had a baby.
We looked into those possibilities, and anything and everything we looked into, we could never determine what that scar was about, where it was from, or frankly, who she was.
The mystery surrounding the unidentified Jane Doe deepens with the discovery of an object placed close to her body. A small Christmas tree decorated with tiny, tiny ornaments.
And so, because of the Christmas tree standing next to her body, she became known as the Christmas Tree Lady.
For now, the so-called Christmas Tree Lady appears to achieve her dying wish to remain anonymous forever. A mysterious Jane Doe with a hidden past.
Somebody knew the Christmas Tree Lady, and we knew that. We knew she had family or acquaintances somewhere. And that's why we didn't give up. We kept telling the story, trying to get answers. We never give up.
The only thing investigators have to go on is a deceased woman who seems to have committed suicide. There is no indication of foul play and no clue as to who she really is. Next, on Bloodline Detectives, the beginning of a long and incredible journey to identify the Christmas Tree Lady. It's 1996 in Annandale, Virginia. Police are trying desperately to piece together the life and the death of a woman found asphyxiated at a local cemetery. With no identification, they dub her the Christmas Tree Lady. What is not known is the identity of the female victim, whose dying wish was to remain anonymous forever.
It's extremely unusual to find a well-dressed woman in a very wealthy county in a cemetery who has, chosen to commit suicide and chosen to obscure her identity, which she did very effectively.
Investigators are now convinced it is a suicide, not foul play, that leads to the death of the Christmas tree lady. The holiday season and the mystery surrounding her identity have fired up the community and put pressure on police to come up with answers.
We have 4 detectives that are dedicated to the mission, but those are 4 hard-working detectives that truly work around the clock and care about their cases, care about the victims that rest in their heart and mind. We had pictures of her, but we couldn't release them because the tragedy of her taking her own life. So we had done a sketch trying to generate interest, and we shared that, hoping somebody would call us.
And that was distributed to the media, hoping that somebody in the area would recognize her clothing, her jewelry, something about her that they would call in and say who they believed it might be.
We got no calls. Nobody called and said, I know this person. She is my mom or sister or neighbor. We ran into yet another dead end when little to no information came in on who she could be.
They actively worked this case for many, many, many years, and to no avail. And they had no other clues to go by.
In 1996, the case of the Christmas tree lady goes cold. Years pass by, but so do incredible advancements in forensic science that may someday solve the mystery.
So they did get tips for years and years of people saying, this might be my aunt, this might be my mother, this might be my daughter. They were getting names. And as the internet grew and interests grew, people who were crime fanatics became interested in this case, and they, on the internet, started trying to figure out who she was and what, these clues might be, that she had a bottle of brandy, that she liked comedy, that she had red hair, she had a C-section scar. People were online trying to figure out who the Christmas tree lady might be.
At first, detectives are encouraged when a new composite drawing produces several possible names from the public. But one by one, they are ruled out by investigators.
They're able to work with what the initial detectives are able to do through sketches, through photographs, and to be able to maybe make something a little bit more cleaner that can be put out, that maybe have a little bit more detail that people can look at. And it might, for somebody that sees that, it might make a difference in them being able to say, yes, this looks like somebody that I know.
The new sketch sparks another influx of people who contact police with possible leads, but none of them can be linked to the Christmas tree lady.
As time went on, when DNA technology became more advanced and was able to be used, that's when we can transition into ruling people out via DNA.
2007, investigators roll the dice and DNA from the body of the Christmas tree lady is retrieved. It's entered into the National DNA Database, CODIS, but unfortunately, it's a long shot that doesn't work. Detectives still refuse to give up.
I guess my one thought was that she wasn't from around here, or somebody would have spoken up. So it was someone who had come from out of our area to here, but to that one spot, which is a small cemetery on a fairly busy road, directly across the street from a community college. It seemed odd that anybody from this area would choose that cemetery unless there was a specific link to it, and the police couldn't find one. So my thinking was that she was from out of the area and was probably estranged from her family because there was no family coming forward to claim her.
In many of these cases, the theory is the person is, you could say, drifter, maybe somebody that is not from the area, somebody that is estranged from family, from friends, because nobody's necessarily looking for this person. Nobody's necessarily calling in and reporting this person missing. And if they are from a very long distance, from very far away, they may report them missing, but it doesn't reach the other side of the country.
Will investigators ever get any closer to the truth behind the identity of the so-called Christmas tree lady? And will technology reverse her death wish to remain anonymous forever? Next on Bloodline Detectives. Annandale, Virginia, 2022. After 26 years, investigators seem no closer to unraveling the mystery of a woman who commits suicide at a cemetery and goes to great lengths to disguise her own identity.
They consistently, over the years, followed up on all the leads that came in when people would call in. They checked back with the FBI. They had her fingerprints rerun. They would check CODIS and make sure that there were no hits and make sure that those searches were continually done. But there were no leads ever amounted or came to any conclusion.
We're fortunate that we are in cold case at a time where genetic genealogy is being utilized, and we've been seeing the results that other jurisdictions have gotten across the country, very successful results. And we knew that this lab, Othram Labs, has been doing great work, and they had reached out to us and said we'd love to take on this case. And so we started looking into it and said we think it's time to take it to the next level and submit her DNA and see what we get, because everything else had been done. This was kind of the next step of what we could do. So we said, let's give it a try and see what we get.
I was surprised and impressed by the confidence that Othram had that they were absolutely going to solve this. I hadn't covered one of these cases where a company comes in cold and takes the data and says, we'll do it.
We summarize the case for them. We talk to them about the case. They do a write-up that gets released. And when they do that, the community members they have the option of funding the case and paying for the case to move forward with the testing. And I believe this case was one that was funded in record time. And it kind of shows the following that this case has had over the years.
We have to fill out a form that gives them the background on the case. They want to see pictures and things like that. And then they have to review the case and get the sample of the DNA to see if it passes their quality control standards, to see if it's something that they can take on and get results from. So they had to review it first, and then we got the notification that the quality control passed and that they were ready to move on to the next step, which was submitting it and seeing if it hit on any genealogical matches.
We looked at all the evidence in the case. Team Othram did as well. And what they look for and what we look for is the best evidence, the best DNA that we can provide Team Othram so they can get to work. And they did. And they did it in lightning speed.
Othram has built a proprietary process for extracting DNA from the most difficult to work with skeletal remains, and being able predictably extracting DNA from those remains, and to be able to build these profiles. And so for an unidentified person, the skeletal remains are the evidence that we start to work with.
Team Othram took that case and in remarkable speed gave us an investigative lead that we never had at our fingertips.
We had from the autopsy her DNA card, a blood card that had her blood sample, and so we sent that to them. So they had a fresh sample straight from her autopsy.
This is just something that hadn't been done yet. A lot of different things were tried in terms of the fingerprints, in terms of the DNA and CODIS, but now we have something new. And I think anytime you have something new that hasn't been tried yet, you're hopeful that it'll work out.
Forensic genetic genealogy is a tool that you can use. It involves both the accumulation of DNA markers that can be assembled into a profile, and then the use of that profile to perform familial relationship testing across any number of individuals. It could be a few individuals, it could be an entire database of folks that have put like profiles into that resource. And what it allows you to do is to find distant relatives to the profile that you submit, and then use traditional genetic genealogy to sort back out the details of who that person might be. And in doing that, you can form a sort of a scaffold of a family tree that connects all the matches. And now you have this unknown profile for which you know the genetic distance, how related or not related they are from each of the matches. And once you've been able to secure a location, or at least rather exclude and eliminate all the other possibilities, what you end up with is an investigative lead, a clue that you can give back to law enforcement that allows them to then investigate whether or not the position on the tree to which you ended up narrowing yourself to could be the actual location for the real identity of the person you're looking for.
We were able to extract DNA and build a DNA profile. And then we were able to upload that profile to genealogical databases consented for law enforcement use. And we had Carla Davis, who is an incredible genealogist, work the genealogy of the case.
I needed to know the basics, the public information, such as what is the age, approximate age. It was 50 to 60 years old. Post-mortem, how long had she been there? It was just a matter of hours that she had taken her life. And she had reddish hair. So these were all pieces of information that I needed to know to help in identifying her if I come across a yearbook picture or a picture that someone has uploaded, or even family resemblance. It does help to know this information. So that I only had the information that was available to the public, that was in the NamUs database, which is our government database for missing persons and unidentified remains.
They did their magic and put it into certain genealogical websites, and they were able to get a match to a very close relative.
I take the top match, I look at the shared matches, and then out of those matches, I find the most recent common ancestor among those matches. So she had a match that was 142 centimorgans, and so a centimorgan is a unit of measure to determine genetic linkage. The higher the centimorgans are, the closer the relationships. So for 142 centimorgans, I needed to probably build back to the great grandparents, possibly great grandparents of that individual. And that is what I did. She had another match that she shared 219 centimorgans with, and I did the same thing with that match. So I built back to great grandparents and started working those lines forward. Luckily, one side was from her paternal side and one side was from her maternal side. So those two most recent common ancestors converged at her mom and her dad.
Investigative genealogy reignites this cold case more than 2 decades after the Christmas tree lady commits suicide.
We met with Ed O'Carroll for lunch, and we gave him the investigative leads of who we thought it might be. Ed conferred with his team and came up with a strategy on how to talk to the family. And they went in there and they spoke to her brother, who confirmed that he did have a relative that was missing.
So I provided the name of her brother. I researched that family, listed all the children, found the name of a living sibling, and that was the name that I provided to Othram to provide to the investigators.
That was an incredible day. I remember it well. Team Orthram, David and Kristen were here in Fairfax County in the Washington, D.C. area. I made time to have lunch with them to thank them for the work that they were doing. And when David passed a note to me with that investigative lead, I was impressed. I would pass that to the detectives, and they would be on their way to knock on a door. And that door led to the Christmas tree lady's brother.
And so that was the first indication I had that, my gosh, Othram has done it. It took them not that long, a month or two, before they had traced the genealogy from the unidentified person to a man in Southern Virginia who might be her brother.
The Bloodline Detectives at Othram Labs may have finally identified a relative who still lives in Virginia, a relative who just might unlock the mysterious identity of the Christmas tree lady. That's next. In 2022, scientists at Othram Labs are pioneering the use of genetic genealogy. They believe they finally identified the so-called Christmas tree lady, a woman who took her own life in a Virginia cemetery in 1996. Their research leads them to a man they believe is the woman's brother.
So we were super excited, and we learned that he was just a few hours away in the Virginia Beach area, which is not a far drive for us. So we were definitely going to go in person, and we were going to speak to him, and we did.
So detectives started their cruisers and set off on their journey, unknown if it would be the lead that we all hoped it would. And sure enough, it was jackpot.
We met with him, and we also were able to speak with his daughter, and they right away said, well, we have a family member that has disappeared about 30 years ago, and we've been looking for her. And right when they said that, we knew we were on the right track. And so then it's just the steps of getting more information about who this person is, and we found out that it was his sister, and her name was Joyce Meyer, and that she had been estranged from the family for quite some time and had lived in Arizona, which then also matched up with what we were thinking, is that she wasn't from this area and no one knew she was missing. So they wouldn't know to report her missing or know that when the body was found in Virginia and we were doing media releases, people across the country weren't seeing that, and that explained why she hadn't been identified for all of these years. So then the next step was just confirming that through the DNA. So we were able to get his DNA.
And then we would meet her sister, and we would get answers that we waited a lifetime for.
I spoke to her sister, who was very friendly, and told me what she knew about her sister. Although she had been out of touch with her for many years, nobody knew what had happened to her. She said that my ex-husband and my brother and others had been looking for her in the 90s, and we couldn't find her. There was some concern about, her estate or what she would inherit from the family. And so they had sort of legal reasons to try to find the missing daughter. So the younger sister told me that they had tried to find Joyce, couldn't find her, and then out of the blue, she gets a call from her brother and her niece in Virginia saying, the police think that they've found Joyce. And so they showed her the enhanced composite that had been done in 2000.
And when she saw that photograph, she said 1,000% that was going to be her sister that was missing.
And she provided an initial confirmation. The police then took DNA from her to match it with Joyce, and that's how they confirmed who Joyce was.
Finally, investigators have a name for the so-called Christmas tree lady. But who is Joyce Summers, the mysterious woman who somehow ends up in a Virginia cemetery all those years before?
Was a wonderful woman, well-educated, caring, a sibling to a wonderful sister and a brother.
She was born in Davenport, Iowa in 1927. She was the oldest of 5 children.
Her sister described her as very smart, very artistic. She graduated from college with a journalism degree and began working at 17 Magazine in California.
Worked at that job for some time, and then apparently became disillusioned with that job and decided to become a teacher in South Central inner city Los Angeles in the 1950s.
Which was difficult for her. She didn't have a teaching background. She had 60 children in her class, but her sister said that she could do it because that's the type of person she was.
A family rift, however, leads to Joyce becoming estranged from her siblings.
In the 1960s, her sister told me that their mother went to Los Angeles to meet with Joyce and to have sort of a confrontational encounter, which apparently lasted for 24 hours and was very confrontational and nasty. And the mother was accused of mistreating Joyce as a child, and the mother returned back to Iowa heartbroken.
Next on Bloodline Detectives, the so-called Christmas tree lady now has a real name, Joyce Summers. It's a huge step, but it's only the first piece of a puzzle that Bloodline Detectives want to complete. After 26 long years, a team of detectives and forensic scientists identify a suicide victim named Joyce Summers. Summers committed suicide in a Virginia cemetery, but leaves a note asking she never be identified. For investigators, having a name is one thing, but the details of a life is what they're after.
Joyce was married twice. The second marriage, Joyce didn't share who her husband was, didn't share that she had gotten remarried. They only found that out later. And then after that marriage dissolved in 1977, Joyce moved to Arizona.
Family decades ago did try to find her in that Arizona home. When they went there, it was abandoned. She wasn't there. They would never know that she moved to the Washington, D.C., Northern Virginia area. And I think when we put out the calls for family and friends, that's probably why they went unanswered, because Joyce did not have family that lived in the Fairfax County area.
Joyce's family learned that Joyce had become very enamored of a psychiatrist in Los Angeles, and that she closely consulted with him on a lot of things about her life, and that she had become convinced that her family in Iowa was the source of her psychiatric problems or psychiatric unhealthfulness, and started to separate herself from her family and not communicate with them. In the late 80s, early 90s, one of her brothers goes to Arizona to talk to her about wills and estates and things like that, and she's gone. The trailer is there, but it's been abandoned. And in looking through the trailer, the brother goes to the refrigerator and opens it up and finds 4 copies of a book that apparently Joyce had self-published called The Target Child, and which you can see from the back cover. There's a picture of her, and then there's discussion about how trauma that is suffered by a child has a ripple effect which lasts through the rest of one's life. And so we can get the impression that she had written this book about the impact of a traumatic childhood.
The sister said that the book essentially talked about Joyce's childhood, and she suspected the title, The Target Child, was because Joyce said that she felt as if she always had a target on her back growing up.
If Joyce truly did have some sort of traumatic childhood, it was not known to the other siblings. But of course, we don't know what happens between a mother and a child, or a father and a child, or even a sibling and a child. But it's possible that she was singled out, targeted, as she apparently claimed, for abuse. It clearly affected her, and she felt, whether true or not, that she had been, mistreated as a kid, and that it had impacted her the rest of her life.
It's profoundly sad that Joyce at 69 would take her life in a Fairfax County cemetery. That saddens me that she made that decision on that day. I wish I had a chance to meet her prior, and I wish we maybe could have helped her before she made that decision.
It's hard to speculate why she chose that specific place and why she had the pink child's fanny pack, especially when there are no records that points or indicates that she had any children. So did she have one and lose one? Those are questions that we may never know.
There's something really sad about someone deciding to take their life and not wanting to be reconnected to anyone, and not wanting an autopsy, not wanting someone to figure out anything about what happened. She just wanted to be gone.
Joyce went to great lengths to hide her identity, so possibly she would be very annoyed to learn that we have uncovered her identity. But at the same time, you know, the law enforcement agencies, they have a job to do, and they had a deceased body. And regardless if it was a suicide or her wishes, they had to identify her.
I don't think Joyce would be very happy with me. But, you know, her family deserved some answers, and I think our community wondered. So she might not be overly happy, but it was necessary. If we didn't solve it now, this might have been a forever case, and I don't like forever unknown cases. So it was the right thing to do.
Investigators are convinced that identifying Joyce was ultimately the right thing because it gave resolution to her family.
Carla Davis, genealogy, and the Othram team together, we will continue to work on all the cases that we are given until we're able to say that there are no more unidentified people. And we look forward to that.
What Othram does, and what Othram does so well, is a game changer. It is a game changer. We see it in this case. We see it in other cases. We're, I think, on the cutting edge of closing more cases.
This case remained unsolved for decades, and no one could build one of these profiles. But it's remarkable that the things that people can't build a profile for or couldn't in the past are completely unremarkable to us. They go through our QC process and run through our lab in a relatively streamlined manner that allows us to provide those identities quickly and make impact in a much greater scale.
Joyce Summers' life took her from Ohio to California and from Arizona to Virginia. For 2 decades, Joyce successfully concealed her identity from the outside world, and she was known simply as the Christmas Tree Lady. Now, investigators and her family can at last close the final chapter in the life and the death of Joyce Summers.
So I think there's always a handful of cases that police officers or detectives talk about, and this was one that always stumped us. It's very uncommon to have someone maybe wash their identity, type a note, and ask not for an autopsy not to be done. I mean, it's unique and different, which raised our curiosity. We always thought we would get answers. It took a long time, but to know where we are today is remarkable. This case we always knew wasn't criminal. Law enforcement traditionally works criminal cases, and we chase suspects, and we make arrests. This case wasn't about that. This case was a mystery. This case had very unusual circumstances, and it baffled detectives because we didn't know who the Christmas Tree Lady was. So it was inspiring that we got answers and that we put the closed label on this box. And I As soon as we're done putting this box on the shelf, we're taking another one off. So our work continues.
This was a highly unusual case for the Bloodline Detectives. A traditional crime was not committed. A perpetrator was never arrested. For 2 decades, Joyce successfully hid her identity from the rest of the world. For 2 decades, she got her dying wish to be simply a Jane Doe, known only as the Christmas Tree Lady. I'm Nancy Grace. Thank you for joining us here on Bloodline Detectives.